The story begins on a dark and stormy night with Dave Mitchell driving his rig through the winding roads of a dense forest. He's hauling a load through a remote area, far from any towns or rest stops, and the storm that has been brewing all day has finally broken. Sheets of rain lash against the windshield, and the wind howls through the trees, making the road ahead almost impossible to see. The storm grows more intense, with lightning flashing across the sky and thunder rumbling like distant artillery. The road becomes slick and treacherous, and Dave knows he needs to find a place to wait out the worst of it. As he navigates a narrow mountain pass, his headlights catch a glimpse of a small dirt road leading off into the woods, barely visible in the downpour. With no better options and the storm showing no signs of letting up, Dave decides to take the dirt road, hoping it leads to some sort of shelter. The road is rough and overgrown, the truck's tires kicking up mud as it lurches deeper into the forest. After what feels like an eternity, Dave spots a small cabin nestled among the trees, its windows dark but intact, and its wooden structure weathered but still standing. Relieved to have found shelter, Dave parks his truck under the cover of the trees and makes a dash for the cabin. The rain is icy cold, and by the time he reaches the front porch, he's soaked to the bone. The door creaks open with a touch and Dave steps inside, the warmth of the cabin a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. Inside, the cabin is dimly lit by the flickering flames of a dying fire in the stone hearth. The air is thick with the smell of damp wood and something faintly metallic. As Dave looks around, he sees that the cabin is sparsely furnished. A couple of old chairs, a wooden table, and a small dusty kitchen area. It's clear that the place hasn't been lived in for a long time, but there are signs that someone has been here recently. A coat hanging by the door, a pair of muddy boots near the hearth, and Dave feels a chill that has nothing to do with the storm outside. He senses that something is off, but he pushes the thought aside, telling himself that someone must have used the cabin for shelter and left in a hurry. As he explores the cabin further, he notices strange details. A faded photograph on the mantel of a stern-looking family, their eyes appearing almost too intense. An old journal lying open on a chair, its pages filled with frantic, almost illegible writing, and claw marks on the woe. The storm outside intensifies, and Dave realizes he's stuck here until it passes. He stokes the fire and tries to settle in for the night, but the unsettling atmosphere of the cabin makes it difficult to relax. The wind outside howls like a wild animal, and the rain pounds against the roof, creating an almost deafening noise. Despite the warmth of the fire, the air in the cabin feels cold, and Dave can't shake the feeling that he's being watched. As the night wears on, the cabin begins to reveal its dark past. Dave hears strange noises, footsteps creaking on the floorboards above, whispers echoing through the walls, and the faint sound of a woman sobbing. Every time he investigates, he finds nothing, but the sounds continue, growing louder and more insistent. Dave's unease turns to fear when he notices that the photograph on the mantel has changed. The faces of the family now look twisted and malevolent, their eyes following him wherever he goes. The journal's pages, once covered in chaotic writing, are now blank, except for a single word scrawled across the last page: leave. Determined to leave the cabin, Dave grabs his jacket and heads for the door, but as he reaches for the handle, the door slams shut on its own, the sound echoing through the cabin like a gunshot. The lights flicker, and the fire in the hearth goes out, plunging the room into darkness. The wind outside howls louder, and the cabin seems to shake with the force of the storm. In the darkness, Dave feels a presence, a cold, malevolent force that fills the room. He fumbles for his flashlight and shines it around, but the beam seems to barely cut through the inky blackness. As the light sweeps across the room, he sees them, the former occupants of the cabin, their ghostly forms standing silently in the corners, their faces pale and twisted with rage. The spirits begin to move towards him, their eyes burning with anger and sorrow. Dave's heart races as he realizes that these are the ghosts of those who lived and died in the cabin, trapped in a cycle of torment. The air grows colder, and the oppressive weight of their presence makes it hard for him to breathe. Desperate to escape, Dave tries to force the door open, but it won't budge. The walls seem to close in around him, and the whispers grow louder, filling his mind with terrifying visions of the cabin's dark past. A family torn apart by violence. Their lives ended in tragedy. Their souls left to haunt the place for eternity. In a last-ditch effort, Dave remembers the journal. He grabs it and flips through the pages, looking for anything that might help him. The words "leave" flash before his eyes. But instead of giving up, Dave starts speaking aloud, addressing the spirits directly. He apologizes for intruding and promises to leave if they let him go. He speaks with sincerity, hoping that acknowledging their pain will grant him mercy. For a moment, the spirits pause, their forms flickering as if unsure of what to do. The air in the cabin becomes charged with tension, and Dave feels as though time has stopped. Then, slowly, the spirits begin to retreat, their eyes still locked on him, but their expressions softening. The cabin falls silent once more, and the oppressive cold lifts slightly. The door creaks open on its own, revealing the storm outside beginning to abate. Dave takes the opportunity and bolts for the door, not looking back as he sprints to his truck. Dave climbs into the cab, his hands shaking as he starts the engine. The headlights pierce through the lingering fog and rain, illuminating the dark road ahead. He floors the gas pedal, desperate to put as much distance between himself and the haunted cabin as possible. As he drives away, the storm finally begins to break, the rain tapering off and the wind dying down. The forest seems less menacing now, but the memory of what he experienced in the cabin stays with him. Dave can't shake the feeling that he narrowly escaped something far worse than a storm. He reaches the main road, relieved to see the familiar highway signs and the first hints of dawn breaking on the horizon. The warmth of the rising sun helps to dispel the lingering fear, but Dave knows he'll never forget the night he spent in that cabin. The story ends with Dave pulling into a truck stop, exhausted but safe. As he parks the truck and steps out, he takes a deep breath, grateful for the light of day. He glances back at the direction he came from, the forest now far behind him, and silently vows to never again take refuge in a place he doesn't know. As Dave sits down with a cup of coffee, the story of the cabin plays out in his mind, a haunting memory that will stay with him forever. He survived the night, but he knows that the cabin and its restless spirits are still out there, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler to stumble upon them.